Hola, ¿cómo están, my compadres? I've been digging into this COVID-19. I've been wanting to know what is COVID-19. So I've been looking at my resources, Congressional Research Center, clicking links. I've come across this page that says instructions for completing the human infection with 2019 coronavirus case report form. So this is important intel on how they gather all the intel about all of us. One thing that I noticed that was interesting is it talked about it uses this code right here. It's an algorithm to produce a unique identifier. And so what that is, that's a unique identifier that tracks an individual whether they've tested positive. If they've tested positive, they will be tracked with this unique identifier through the CDC system from this day forward. Or if they're presumed to be positive based upon presumptions and assumptions laid out in this form, if you fall into that, then you can also get one of these new unique identifiers. If you get one of these unique identifiers, you can never test out of it. It's funny because it says right here at the bottom, it talks about positive test. If identified, oh, this is also, okay, right here, right at the very bottom, date of first positive specimen collection. So, oh, that's the first date you tested positive. But look, if the person tested negative or is awaiting initial test results or was never tested, select NA. So you can never test negative. So it's only a matter of time before you will get a NCOV unique identifier. And it's interesting they use the word algorithm because that's what it's going to be. They're going to put us into an algorithm. I'm looking at all these definitions. Here we have reporting a confirmed case. This is where I came across the information explaining how to even report the case. So it talks about reporting exposure and contact history, informing on persons under investigation or information on persons under investigation. They used to call it PUIs, people under investigation, but now the PUIs, they've given those unique identifiers. They also have very blatantly said that they will have to report individuals that have zero actual symptoms. Asymptomatic is what they say. This right here is a definition of NCOV. This is what they have been telling the NNDS, the National Notifiable Disease Surveillance System. This is it. A surveillance case definition is a set of uniform criteria used to define a disease for public health surveillance. Roger. This is the interim 20 ID 01. I don't know what that means. Background. In late December 19, investigation of a cluster pneumonia case of unknown origin in Wuhan, China resulted in identification of a novel coronavirus. This virus is distinct from both severe acute respiratory syndrome and Middle East respiratory syndrome. It's distinct, so it's distinct from these two, although closely related. It's similar to MERS, it's similar to SARS. Early epidemiological findings indicate that COVID-19 may be less severe. Okay, that's important though, than SARS and MERS. But evidence suggests that the virus is more contagious than its predecessors. So it's less severe, but it's more contagious. Severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus is a newly identified pathogen, and it is assumed there is no existing human immunities. Everyone is assumed to be susceptible, although there may be risk factors that increase case and individual illness susceptibility. It's so interesting. Based on the epidemiological reports, outbreaks in China, those at higher risk of severe disease death include people over the age of 60 with underlying conditions and hypertension. And it goes on to say children appear to be relatively unaffected, growing evidence that a significant proportion of infections across all groups are actually asymptomatic. I'm I get stuck on that asymptomatic. Asymptomatic means that you are healthy. That's asymptomatic means that your body is working. Asymptomatic means that you have germs inside of you that your body is able to fight off. If you go through this criteria for diagnosing, you will come to find out that these epidemiological links, one or more of the following exposures in 14 days. If you continue to go down here, it'll tell you clinical criteria, epidemiological criteria, but then right here it says criteria to distinguish a new case from an existing case. And right here underneath it says not applicable until more virological data are available. And so that means that until they have more NCOV identifier numbers, then their algorithm won't work for their mass surveillance system of individuals that are just It talks about close contact with people for close contact is defined as being within 6 feet for at least a period of 10 minutes to 30 minutes. You know that's really, it's supposed to be 30 minutes or more depending upon the exposure. In healthcare settings, this may be defined as exposure greater than a few minutes or more. Data are insufficient to precisely define the duration of exposure that constitutes prolonged exposure and thus a close contact. There you go. What I'm really gathering from this is that SARS, MERS, all of these acute respiratory distress syndrome inducing viruses are all very similar and that they can play a bit of shenanigans with them. The last thing I need to show everybody is the fact that the new COVID virus, or vaccine, I mean to say, is going to be it's covered by the normal immunities that viruses are covered under, but it's also going to be covered under a legislation that will also make it to where any and all vaccines that young people are given are no longer susceptible to lawsuits. It's a very interesting article. It's not an article, it's from the CRS. It says the PrEP Act in COVID 19 limiting liability for medical countermeasures. So that means taking away accountability. So I zoomed down to the bottom, checking it out. I zoomed to the last paragraph. There's been three declarations, three changes made, and then I want to go down to there's a third amendment. A third amendment to the HHS declaration issued August 19, 2020 expanded the definition of covered diseases and covered persons. First, the HHS expanded the categories of diseases representing a public health emergency to reach not just COVID-19, but also other diseases, health conditions, or threats that may have been caused by COVID-19. So they're saying they made a problem and now they're alleviating themselves from COVID-19, SARS, or virus mutating therefrom. In particular, such other diseases, including diseases resulting from the decrease in the rate of childhood immunization, which will lead to an increase in the rate of infectious disease. The amendment thus declares that pediatric vaccines, if licensed by the FDA and recommended by the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, are covered countermeasures. That means that they took every single protection a parent has on their side, protecting them from having their children injected with something that they don't necessarily want them to have injected, has been removed. This passage of this Third Amendment by the HHS, which is the Health and Human Services Department, I'm almost positive, and it passed September 21st. I mean, this is recent stuff. The fact that they've taken away our protections. I also find it interesting the fact that they have allowed other diseases to be covered under this. It's almost like they're alleviating themselves of all of the consequences of what they've caused. They're manipulating the system into allowing us to think that respiratory diseases are something that we should be afraid of. Respiratory diseases are something that make us strong. Just like weights when you're in the gym, you're only as strong as the weights you lift up. You're only as powerful as the problems you can solve. You're only as strong as the bugs you fight off. They say that resistance creates greatness. Pressure makes diamonds. Pressure makes diamonds, baby. Pressure is real. Pressure is the realest thing in the world. It'll teach you so much about yourself. Pressure will actually teach you who you are. And it's in those moments that we fall that we can get up and get a little bit better. It's in those moments that we jump and we see how high we can go. But this sort of shenanigans that they're pulling with this PrEP Act and the fact that they have just removed all protections from parents and vaccines and the fact that they have such a flimsy definition for COVID-19 and the fact that it's a flimsy definition, but the surveillance system is unlike anything I've ever seen. So it's they have arbitrary disease that they're gonna maximize their efforts towards. It's literally like using a sledgehammer to attack a fly. It's literally the worst thing that they could do to our country. I've showed you the spending reports. Something will have to give. Something will give. Praise the Lord always and forever.